Camping in the wilderness can be a really exhilarating experience, but it can also be a terrifying experience, an experience that never truly leaves you. The first story is scary, the second story, scarier still, but the third story will absolutely blow your mind, so make sure you stick around for that one. I'm your host, Severed Soul. This Labour Day weekend marks 7 years since the most terrifying experience of my entire life whilst I was alone in the woods. I've gone back and forth about sharing this, but I'm telling it exactly as it happened, no details left out. In fact, what happened disturbed me so much I still have nightmares about it to this day. Twice a year, I meet up with close friends for a camping trip deep in the Amish country of eastern Ohio. The land is privately owned and used as an outdoors club, offering everything from hiking and fishing to firing ranges and shelters. Some shelters have electricity, and one even has a kitchen and bathrooms, everything you'd need except showers. I've always felt honoured to be invited to this place. From the outside, you'd never guess what lies beyond the gated entrance. It just looks like another path used for farming equipment. Past the gate, the road drops sharply into a secluded ravine before opening up into a wide meadow surrounded by steep, forested hills. The shelters and firing ranges are here, along with a lake. A causeway leads from the lake to our usual camping area, tucked just behind the tree line under a dense canopy. We arrange our tents in a circle around a fire pit, with a small open shelter nearby that covers a few picnic tables and our firewood. I always set up my hammock in the same grove of evergreens on the southern edge of camp. Nothing beats falling asleep to the scent of fresh pine, swaying gently as the wind whispers through the needles, shimmering in the moonlight above. If you've had a bit too much fun, the soft ground below even provides a decent landing. It's the perfect setup. Past the tents, trails lead further downhill. One path winds through a gully with a small creek and waterfalls connecting the main lake to another one about half a mile away. On occasion, we've even come across local Amish kids swimming there. It's a serene, quiet spot, teeming with bird life. One day, while talking with friends, I overheard someone mention a third lake, one I had never known existed, despite years of camping there. Apparently, the club no longer owned that section of land because it had become mostly marsh, and no one ever went back that far. Immediately, I was hooked. I had visions of discovering an untouched fishing paradise, home to record-breaking bass, walleye and catfish. Over the years, we'd pulled some incredible fish out of the other two lakes, so I was convinced this lake held some even bigger secrets. That Labour Day weekend, I packed my bag meticulously, checking it multiple times in preparation for my expedition. On Saturday morning, over breakfast, we discussed our plans for the day. There were 12 of us, 5 adults and 7 kids. Everyone else decided to head up to the North Shelter, taking their time getting started. But I was too eager to wait, so I set off on my own. I hiked to the second lake, following its edge until I spotted a faint deer trail that seemed to lead towards the third lake while avoiding the worst of the marsh. It was slow going, thick with vines and thorns, but I had my trusty panga machete to help me clear the way. After about 20 minutes, I reached the patch of cattails. They stretched only about 15 yards. And then, suddenly, there it was, the third lake. It was perfect. The water was like glass, reflecting the bright blue sky. Lush green hills surrounded it, untouched and pristine. It was even more breathtaking than I had imagined. I set my bag down and started looking through my gear, but almost immediately I was overwhelmed by a really strange feeling. I couldn't focus. I kept forgetting what I was looking for, digging through my bag repeatedly, only to forget again. When I finally got a rod rigged, it was an uncharacteristically sloppy setup. Frustrated, but determined, I started casting from different spots along the rocky shore. Nothing, not a single bite. I tried different baits and different locations, but it just seemed like the lake was empty. And that is when I realised just how strange I was feeling. An overwhelming haze clouded my mind, accompanied by an uncharacteristic wave of frustration. No, rage. I'm not someone who angers easily, but I was seething. Unable to shake the feeling, I finally gave up, packed up my gear in a rush, and made my way back to the cattails. That's when everything got worse. As I neared the cattails, a sudden wave of nausea hit me. The air reeked, so foul that I gagged out loud. Then, without warning, something large crashed past me, bumping my left arm hard enough to knock the machete out of my hand to the floor. I froze on the spot, my pulse hammering in my ears. A deer. Surely it had to be. But I saw nothing. I frantically scanned the brush, searching for movement, but the only sounds were the ones I was making. Everything else was silent. Not just quiet, completely silent. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves, just an unnatural, suffocating stillness. Then I noticed the sky. It looked wrong, like I was seeing it through warped glass, as if the dimensions around me were bending. My gut was screaming at me to run, so that's exactly what I did. I tore through the cattails, but the more I ran, the further they seemed to stretch, like I was stuck on a treadmill. My legs burned, my breath came in ragged gasps, but I couldn't stop. My instinct screamed that something was chasing me. And then I heard it. Something huge was crashing through the underbrush behind me, weaving in and out of my path with terrifying speed. I couldn't see it, at least not clearly. It was like a distortion, barely visible against the trees, shifting and blending as it moved. I pushed harder, lungs on fire, and felt branches whipping against my arms and legs. Blood started to trickle into my eyes from a gash on my forehead. My vision was blurred. Was this intentional? Was this thing herding me deeper into the woods? Suddenly, I broke through the brush and stumbled onto the far western shore of the second lake, an area I had never reached before. The only way out was to swim across. Without hesitation, I yanked off my shirt, tied it around my head to slow the bleeding, and plunged into the water. My limbs screamed in exhaustion, but I swam like my life depended on it. Because it did. Whatever was chasing me never entered the lake. As I crawled onto the opposite shore, I lay there gasping for breath, drenched in sweat and blood. And then I heard it. Someone calling my name.
Stephen.
It was my best friend's voice, but coming from the wrong direction. I knew she was up at the shelter, yet the voice came from deep in the woods across the hollow, somewhere impossible to reach on foot. Then she called again.
Stephen. Stephen.
Something was wrong. The third time, her voice sounded distorted, like a tape recording played at the wrong speed. I ran. When I finally stumbled back into camp, everyone turned pale at the sight of me. After confirming I was okay, I asked if they had sent someone to look for me. They hadn't. Nobody had even called my name. Later that night, as we sat by the fire, I told one of the older guys, Chris, exactly what had happened. He was uneasy, rifle at hand. Around 3 a.m, we heard it. A blood-curdling scream coming from the gully. Metallic, unnatural. Morning came, and nobody else had heard it. Chris and I returned to the third lake, but found nothing. No tracks, no panga. Nature was alive again, as if nothing had happened. But something definitely did happen. I don't hammock camp anymore, and now we sleep in a closed shelter, further from the trees. Before we move on to the next story, please help me out with the YouTube algorithm gods by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Also, don't forget to look out for the paranormal related word popping up at some point in the episode. Hi everyone. I've been going back and forth about sharing this, but a friend encouraged me to put it out there. I really want to emphasise that this experience was 100% genuine, though maybe, and I'm hoping, that there is a logical explanation for it. This happened in late August of 2019, during a 2-day, 1-night camping trip in the Sierra Nevada mountains, about 40 miles north of Yosemite. My friend, we'll call him Sam, and I were scouting for deer ahead of hunting season. We parked along a 2-way highway at around 7,000 feet in elevation and started hiking straight up the mountain. After a while, we came across a flat, open meadow and decided it would be a good place to set up camp. Once we got everything situated, we kept climbing, eventually reaching about 9,000 feet, where we found another meadow. Let's call it the upper meadow. The view from up there was absolutely stunning, showcasing the vast Sierra Nevadas in all their beauty. By this point, I was absolutely exhausted, but Sam wanted to explore the far end of the meadow. The area stretched roughly 350 to 400 yards, with tall grass reaching up to our waists. We had some small packable camping chairs with us, so while Sam wandered off, I decided to sit down, enjoy the view and have a snack. About 15 minutes passed when I was suddenly overcome with a feeling of unease. It wasn't fear exactly, but it was unsettling to say the least, like something unseen was watching me. That feeling gnawed at me until I finally stood up and decided to look for Sam. Strangely, it took me a full 7 minutes to track him down, which didn't make sense given the size of the meadow. That amount of time just felt wrong. Even now as I write this, me and Sam still get chills thinking about it. We can't recall exactly how, but somehow we eventually reconnected and continued hiking to the top of the mountain before heading back down to camp. That night, after eating dinner, we turned in at around 9:30 p.m. At first, everything seemed normal. Occasional animal sounds in the distance, nothing out of the ordinary. I drifted off, but around 12:30 a.m. I was woken up by a strange noise. It sounded like a heavy branch being struck against a tree. I lay in my sleeping bag, completely still, listening as that sound continued. The strange thing was, it wasn't just coming from one place, it was coming from all around us. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was almost suffocating. Then came the footsteps. Something heavy was moving, running even, along the steep incline beside our campsite. The weight behind each step was immense, like whatever it was had serious mass. My body locked up. I wanted to move, to wake Sam, but I was frozen in place, just listening. The footsteps would charge forward, then stop abruptly, only to start up again moments later. What unsettled me the most was the rhythm. It sounded bipedal. Whatever this was, it wasn't moving on 4 legs. This repeated 4 or 5 times before everything fell eerily still. I stayed awake for a long time, listening, waiting, but the sounds never returned. The next morning, I immediately searched the area for any sign of what had happened. Tracks, disturbed earth, anything, but I found nothing. It was as if the night before had been a dream, except I knew it wasn't. Sam, who had been asleep through the whole ordeal, was sceptical at first, but looking back, even he feels differently about that night. I still have no explanation for what we experienced, and thinking about it even now sends a chill down my spine. Ever since that trip, I've had more questions than answers, and I can't shake the feeling that something about that place wasn't quite as it seemed. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. I'm sharing this story in hopes that someone out there might have an explanation. Maybe someone else has camped in the same spot and has experienced something similar. To this day, I still don't understand what happened, and the fear has never left me. My husband and I both love nature, so when I found out he'd never been camping, I knew we had to change that. However, due to the events that transpired in the story I'm about to tell you, my enthusiasm for camping and the outdoors came to a terrifying, abrupt stop. All of my past camping trips had been on the beach. I'd never camped in the woods before. About 2 years ago, we moved to Arizona with our 3-year-old daughter. We settled in Phoenix, and since Flagstaff was only about 2 hours away, I decided to take my husband camping. We found a spot near Williams, a small town about 30 minutes from Flagstaff. The area was beautiful. Tall trees, fresh air, and a quiet, peaceful atmosphere away from the city. By the time we found a campsite, it was already 9 p.m. The place we chose was near Coleman Lake, which isn't actually a lake, but a large grassy field. The area was secluded, surrounded by trees, and away from other campers. It seemed perfect. We set up our tents using only the car's headlights for illumination, then started the fire. Our daughter was exhausted, so we put her to bed in the tent behind us and continued sitting by the fire. A couple of hours later, we decided to turn in for the night. At exactly 3:30 a.m, I woke up with an unshakable sense of unease. I wasn't sure what had roused me, but as I lay there staring at the tent ceiling, I heard it. Something was approaching from the woods behind us. My first thought was that it was probably just an elk or deer, as we had heard elk calls all night. But this thing stopped directly behind our tent and stood there, motionless. I held my breath, frozen in fear. I wanted to wake my husband. He had a gun with him, but I was too scared to move. I strained my ears, waiting for it to leave, but I never heard it walk away. Eventually, as dawn broke, I finally got the courage to step outside and check. There was nothing there. When I told my husband what had happened, he simply dismissed it. "You probably just dozed off and it left without you noticing," he said. I wanted to believe that, so I forced myself to let it go. That night, the exact same thing happened. Something approached, stopped, and never left. It was a whole 2 months before we returned, and since we were familiar with the area, we returned to the same spot again, this time bringing my parents along with us. The first night, as we all sat by the fire, I recounted what had happened last time. My husband insisted it was probably just elk, and as if on cue, we could hear their eerie calls in the distance. Eventually, we turned in for the night, but if I was expecting a peaceful night's sleep, I was wrong. very wrong. If our experience last time was scary, what was about to happen was downright terrifying. At 3:30 am, I woke up again to the sound of footsteps approaching. This time, I didn't hesitate. I immediately turned to wake my husband. But as I reached for him, the footsteps changed. Instead of stopping behind the tent, the thing moved. It circled around to my side, then paused. I held my breath out of pure fear. Then I heard it pick something up and drag it across the ground towards the tent entrance. A scraping sound sent chills down my spine. It was as if it was dragging a large stick, or maybe something even heavier. Summoning my courage, I shook my husband awake and whispered that someone was outside. Without hesitation, he grabbed his gun and yanked the tent open. But when he stepped outside to investigate, there was nothing there. He scoured the area with a flashlight, scanning left and right, but there were no signs of movement, no footprints, and no broken branches. He turned back to me and said, if something had been here, we'd at least hear it running away. But I knew what I'd heard. The next morning, I asked my parents if they had heard anything. My dad said no, but my mum hesitated before saying she thought she'd heard someone walking around but assumed it was just us. That confirmation sent a shiver down my spine. I wasn't imagining things. At night, my husband agreed to stay up with me. We sat in silence, waiting. Around 3 am, he started nodding off, but before I could nudge him to urge him to stay awake, a sudden, blood-curdling elk scream pierced the night. Within seconds, it was followed by the sound of an entire herd stampeding past our campsite. We sat frozen, eyes locked. Something must have scared them, my husband murmured. Maybe a mountain lion. Before I could respond, we heard it again. Footsteps coming from behind our tent. I clutched my husband's arm and whispered, "It's here." He grabbed his gun and bolted outside, but, as always, there was nothing there. Despite everything, we decided to return one more time. My parents joined us again. The first night, the usual routine played out. Footsteps, waiting, nobody was there. But this time, my husband finally heard it too. There was no more denying it. If we thought the previous two experiences were unsettling, things were about to escalate in a big way. The second night, we changed our approach. Instead of sleeping in the tent, we stayed by the fire, thinking we might finally catch whatever was out there. We decided to take turns staying awake. As the fire burned low, my husband woke me up to help stoke it. Then I stayed on watch while he slept. But at some point, exhaustion got the better of me, and I dozed off. I woke up to the sound of something moving. At first, I wasn't fully aware, but as my senses adjusted, I realised that this thing was circling our tent, pacing, passing by over and over again. A wave of dread washed over me. I quickly sat up, but the fire had burned low, leaving us shrouded in darkness. I frantically woke up my husband and we rebuilt the fire. The moment the flames flared up, the feeling of doom lifted, but I couldn't shake the sensation that something was standing just beyond the fire's glow, watching us. Then, later that night, my husband shook me awake. Or, at least, that's what I thought. I groggily opened my eyes to his voice whispering, "Hey, hey, wake up, hey." But when I turned to look at him, he was sound asleep. Panic set in. What I heard wasn't just any voice. It was my husband's voice, and whatever was shaking me was doing so hard enough to leave marks on my shoulders. I immediately got up and restarted the fire. That terrible sense of impending doom lifted as soon as the flames grew. My husband later admitted that he had experienced exactly the same thing. He had heard my voice waking him up, but when he opened his eyes, I was also fast asleep. Needless to say, that was the very last time we camped there. To this day, I don't know what was in those woods, but I know it wasn't an elk. And whatever it was, it sure as hell wasn't friendly. If you enjoyed that episode, please show the channel some support on my journey to 1000 subscribers. Click on the like button and subscribe to the channel for more scary content just like this. There's another video right here that I'm sure you'll love. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Severed Soul.